In the far corner of the galaxy, near the edge of the Federation's outer ring, a small, broken station floated in silence. It had no name, no official records, and no law. People here didn't ask questions. They made deals, took payment, and stayed out of sight. It was perfect for someone like Jalen Cross. Jalen's ship, the Warden, docked with a heavy groan. The metal clamps screeched as they locked his ship in place. He stood from the pilot's seat, checked the pulse pistol strapped to his hip, and took a deep breath. His brown jacket hung loose over his black combat suit, worn from years of use. His boots thudded on the steel floor as he walked toward the hatch. Simple pickup, he whispered to himself. In and out. But Jalen knew better. Jobs were never simple anymore. Not since he left the military and started running data for pay. The galaxy was tense. Rumors spread of systems going silent, ships vanishing, and entire colonies being erased without a trace. People said the High Council was hiding something. Jalen didn't care. At least, he told himself he didn't. He only cared about finishing the job and getting paid. The station's docking bay was dim and smelled of rust and oil. Shadows moved in the corners. Jalen scanned the area carefully, spotting figures unloading cargo from other ships. He walked with purpose, keeping his head down. At the far end of the bay, a man waited. He wore a long black coat and a breathing mask that covered most of his face. His eyes shifted nervously. "You Jalen Cross?" the man asked, his voice muffled by the mask. "Depends who's asking," Jalen replied, standing a few steps away. The man glanced over his shoulder. "No time for games. I have what you came for." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small metal cube, no larger than a fist. It glowed faintly along the edges, a data core. These devices could hold the kind of information that could change governments or start wars. Jalen's stomach tightened. Something felt off. "Who's the client?" Jalen asked, not reaching for the core yet. The man shook his head. "No names. Just deliver it to the free systems. Payment's already waiting for you there." Jalen knew the free systems were far from here. Dangerous space, outside of the Council's control. The risk just doubled. Still, the job was already in motion. Turning back now was an option. He took the core and slipped it into a secure pocket inside his jacket. "Done. I'm leaving." The man grabbed Jalen's arm suddenly. His eyes widened with fear. "You don't understand. They know. They're coming." Jalen pulled his arm free. "Boo." The answer came before the man could speak again. Alarms blared through the station. Red lights flashed. A voice echoed over the loudspeaker. "Attention. This is the Galactic Enforcement Unit. All ships stand down. You are ordered to surrender." Jalen's heart dropped. "Enforcers. Here." He turned to run, but the man was already gone, swallowed by the scattering crowd. Jalen pushed through people and cargo, heading back to the Warden. Blaster fire rang out behind him. Screams filled the air. He ducked behind a stack of crates as armored enforcers stormed the docking bay. They wore black armor with the Council's silver crest on their chests. Their rifles glowed, ready to fire. They didn't ask questions. They never did. Jalen knew he had only seconds. He sprinted toward his ship, dodging blasts of energy that burned into the metal walls. He slammed his palm on the ship's control panel. The hatch hissed open. He dove inside and sealed the door behind him. The ship's engines hummed to life as he jumped into the pilot's seat. Come on," he muttered, flipping switches and punching commands in the console. The station's defense locks were still holding his ship in place. He could see enforcers running toward him through the front window. One raised a rocket launcher. Jalen's fingers flew across the controls. He rerouted power to the engines, forcing them to overload. The ship shook violently. The clamps groaned again, sparks flying. The rocket launched. With a deafening crack, the clamps finally snapped. The Warden shot forward, twisting hard to the right as the rocket exploded behind it. Fire and debris filled the bay. The ship sped through the blast, scraping along the station's hull as it broke free into open space. Jalen didn't stop to breathe. He punched in random jump coordinates, not caring where they took him. The ship's warp drive spun up. Stars stretched into long white lines as the ship vanished into hyperspace. Jalen leaned back in his seat, breathing hard. His heart pounded in his ears. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the data core. The soft glow of the device seemed brighter now. "What the hell did I just steal?" he whispered. He didn't have the answer yet, but he knew one thing for sure. Whoever wanted this core was willing to kill for it. Jalen Cross stayed in hyperspace for as long as his ship could take it. He had no clear destination. He just needed to get as far from that station as possible. He knew the Council didn't send enforcers for small matters. Whatever he was carrying had to be massive, maybe even dangerous enough to start a war. The Warden's engine beeped, pulling him out of hyperspace near a dead planet called Myros 7. It was quiet, cold, and forgotten by the galaxy. Perfect for hiding. He guided his ship toward the planet's dark side, settling it on a rocky surface. He shut down the power to avoid detection. Only the emergency lights stayed on. The cabin was silent. Jalen sat in the pilot's seat, staring at the small metal cube resting on the console. The data core seemed ordinary on the outside, but he knew better. He had carried dozens of these before. None of them caused a full enforcer raid. He reached under the console and pulled out his personal decryptor. It was old but reliable. He placed the core on the device. The core's glow flickered as the decryptor linked with it. A small screen lit up, asking for the security key. Jalen didn't have a key. He wasn't supposed to have it, but years of smuggling had taught him a few tricks. He started running a crack program that forced the core open by breaking its security walls one by one. It was slow and risky. If the core was trapped with a self-destruct command, it could fry the data, or worse. Minutes felt like hours as the program worked. Jalen wiped sweat from his forehead. His hand hovered over the emergency shut-off switch, just in case. Finally, the screen blinked. Security breach. Data opened. Jalen leaned in. Files began to scroll across the screen. They were marked with council seals and high-level encryption codes. He opened the first document. His face grew pale as he read the headline. Operation Final Dawn, authorized vote outcome, complete human erasure, 30 days to execution. Jalen's throat tightened. He scrolled through the pages. Names, votes, fleet orders. It was all there. The High Council had voted, in secret, to erase humanity from a galaxy. They called it necessary population control and galactic resource preservation. Earth was listed as target alpha. Ships had already been dispatched. Massive AI fleets, fully automated and armed to the core. No survivors were expected. No warnings would be given. Jalen sat back, shocked. He kept reading. The documents explained that humanity had been labeled as unstable, a threat to technological progress. The Council believed humans had used up their worth. Their time in the galaxy was over. Jalen's hands shook with rage. His parents had died in a Council raid years ago, but he never knew why. Now it made sense. The Council had been planning this for a long time, and Earth's people had no idea. His mind raced. He knew what had to be done. Someone had to reveal this to the galaxy. Someone had to warn Earth, but he couldn't do it alone. Jalen thought of the only person he trusted, Lyra Hale. She was a former rebel pilot who now flew cargo runs in the free systems. She had the network, the contacts, and the guts to help him. He hadn't spoken to her in years, but there was no one else. He powered up the ship's comm system and opened a private channel. It took a few tries before the signal connected. A woman's tired voice answered. "Who is this?" Jalen took a breath. "It's Jalen. I need your help." There was a long pause. "Jalen? You've got nerve calling me after all this time." "I don't have time to explain," Jalen said. "I've got something big. Something that could save Earth." Another pause. He could almost hear her thinking. "Where are you?" she asked. "Near Myros 7. She sighed. "I'm 2 jumps away. This better be worth it." Jalen stared at the data core, knowing she wouldn't believe him until she saw it herself. "It is," he said quietly. "It's humanity's death sentence." He ended the call and leaned back. He checked his weapons, made sure the core was secured again, and prepared for what came next. The galaxy was darker than he ever imagined, but he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. He had 30 days to stop the Council. Jalen paced inside his ship. Time dragged as he waited for Lyra. Every minute felt heavier than the last. He couldn't stop thinking about the data. The Council had already moved its fleets. Humanity's time was running out. A blinking light on the console broke the silence. Lyra's ship had arrived. Jalen rushed to the cockpit and watched her vessel, the Nomad, settle beside his on the rocky surface. It was smaller than the Warden, built for speed. She had always flown light and fast. Jalen opened the hatch and stepped out into the cold. The cracked surface of Myros, 7, stretched around them. Lyra stood near her ship, arms crossed, her helmet under one arm. She hadn't changed much. Her short dark hair still framed the same sharp eyes he remembered. She didn't smile. "Jalen Cross," she said dryly. "Still alive after all these years?" Jalen nodded. "Barely." She walked closer, stopping just a few steps away. "You dragged me all the way out here. What's going on?" Jalen didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out the data core. Lyra raised an eyebrow. "A data core? That's what this is about." "Not just any core," Jalen said. He turned and motioned for her to follow him inside. Once they were both in the Warden, Jalen locked the hatch and placed the core on the console. Lyra leaned on the back of the seat, watching him work. "You call me for a delivery job?" she asked. Jalen shook his head. "Not a job. A warning." He loaded the files again. Lyra leaned in, her expression shifting from annoyance to confusion, then to shock. She read the words slowly, her mouth tightening. When she finished, she stepped back, staring at him. "Is this real?" she asked. "I wish it wasn't," Jalen replied. Lyra rubbed her face with both hands. "The Council is wiping out Earth." Jalen nodded. "In 30 days. The fleets are already moving." She paced the cabin, breathing hard. "This can't be true. Someone would have leaked it by now. The media, the free systems, someone." "They covered it up," Jalen said. "I saw it happen. They sent enforcers after me the moment I picked this up. They're hunting me now." Lyra stopped pacing. "If this is true, the whole galaxy needs to know." "That's why I called you," Jalen said. "We have to get this out. We have to warn Earth." Lyra stared at the screen, silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right," she said, "but we need to move fast. The free systems have a data net that can reach every colony. If we reach it in time, we can send this to everyone." Jalen felt a small wave of relief. She believed him. Lyra walked back toward the hatch. "I'll prep the Nomad." "We can." An alarm screamed through the ship, cutting her off. Jalen spun toward the console. "We've got company." A red light blinked on the scanner. Multiple ships were approaching fast. Jalen pulled up the feed. "Enforcer ships." "They found us," Jalen said. Lyra grabbed his arm. "We can't fight them here. We have to run." Jalen nodded and powered up the engines. Lyra bolted back to her ship. Jalen's hands moved fast across the controls. The ship shook as the engines roared back to life. The first blast hit the ground nearby, throwing dust and debris against the hull. Jalen lifted off, pushing the ship into the thin atmosphere. Lyra's ship rose beside him. More blasts followed. The enforcers were closing in. Jalen heard Lyra's voice crackle over the comm. "2 ships on my tail." "I see them," Jalen replied, banking hard to the right. He opened fire, his pulse cannons lighting up the dark sky. One enforcer ship exploded in flames, but another took its place. Lyra's ship zipped past him, flying low and fast. Jalen followed, sticking close to her path. They weaved between jagged rock spires as the enforcers closed the gap. Jalen clenched his teeth. He couldn't outrun them, not in the atmosphere. He opened the comm again. "Lyra, we need to jump now." "Coordinates?" she shouted. Jalen didn't have any. He quickly scanned the star maps. The closest system was Heron's Reach, a mining colony deep in Free Systems territory. It was dangerous, but it was their best shot. "Heron's Reach," he said. "Sending coordinates now." Lyra didn't question it. "On your mark." Jalen punched in the jump sequence. The ship rattled as the engines built power. The enforcers fired again, hitting the rear shields. Warning lights flashed across the console. 3, 2, 1, jump, Jalen shouted. Both ships vanished into hyperspace, just as another blast tore through the space they had occupied. Jalen leaned back in his seat, breathing hard again. His ship had taken damage, but it was still flying. He checked the scanner. Lyra was still with him. He glanced at the data core glowing faintly on the console. The council wasn't going to stop, but neither was he. Jalen and Lyra dropped out of hyperspace near Heron's Reach. The system was ugly, filled with dead rock, mining stations, and half-broken ships floating in orbit. It was not a place for honest business. People here sold anything for the right price. Jalen knew it was risky, but they had no other choice. Lyra's voice came through the comm. "Are you sure about this?" Jalen looked at the flickering lights on his ship's console. His shields were weak. His fuel was low. "We need a faster way to spread the data," Jalen replied. "There's someone here who can help." Lyra sighed. "Who?" "Koro," Jalen answered. "A black market AI hacker. If anyone can blast this data across every channel, it's him." Jalen knew Koro's price would be high, but time was running out. They landed on an old platform near a rusty control tower. Jalen grabbed the data core, checked his pistol, and stepped out. Lyra followed, keeping close. The air smelled like burned metal and oil. Strange figures watched them from the shadows. Jalen led Lyra through dark alleys between cargo crates and broken ships. They reached a small shack with flickering lights. A sign above the door read, "Data Works." Jalen pushed the door open. Inside, machines hummed softly. Screens lined the walls, showing streams of data from all over the galaxy. In the center sat Koro, a tall, thin man with mechanical implants on his head and arms. His eyes glowed faint blue. Koro leaned back in his chair and smiled when he saw Jalen. Well, look who's alive." Jalen stepped closer, holding up the data core. "I need this broadcasted. To everyone. Everywhere." Koro stood, tilting his head. "That's a big ask. What's in it?" "Proof the council plans to wipe out humanity," Jalen answered. Koro's smile faded. He held out his hand. "Let me see." Jalen hesitated, then handed over the core. Koro plugged it into a machine. His glowing eyes scanned the files. He let out a low whistle. "You weren't lying," Koro said. "This is heavy, very heavy. Can you do it or not?" Lyra asked. Koro nodded. "I can, but it's going to cost you." Jalen expected that. "How much?" Koro leaned forward. 50,000 credits. "And I want your ship." Jalen clenched his fists. "That's robbery." "You're asking me to risk my entire operation," Koro replied. "That's my price." Jalen looked at Lyra. She shook her head. "We don't have time to argue," Jalen said. "Do it." Koro smiled again. "Good choice." He turned to his console and started the upload. Lights flashed on the screens as data moved through hidden channels. Jalen watched, feeling the weight on his chest ease just a little. But something felt wrong. Koro's fingers moved too fast. His eyes darted toward a hidden panel on the wall. "Jansku twisted." "Stop," Jalen ordered. Koro froze. "What's the problem?" Jalen drew his pistol. "Step away from the console." Koro laughed. Too late. The door behind them burst open. Enforcers rushed in, weapons raised. Koro had sold them out. Jalen grabbed the core and dove for cover as blasts tore through the air. Lyra fired back, taking down 2 enforcers. Koro ducked behind his desk, shouting over the noise. "You brought this on yourself, Jalen." Jalen didn't waste time on words. He and Lyra fought their way toward the exit. More enforcers blocked the door. Jalen pulled out a smoke grenade and tossed it. Thick smoke filled the room. He grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her toward the back wall. He spotted an old vent large enough to crawl through. "Go," he shouted. They climbed into the vent as blasts echoed behind them. They crawled fast, breathing hard. The vent led them out behind the shack. Jalen kicked open the panel, and they ran toward their ships. More enforcers were closing in. "Get to the warden," Jalen yelled. They sprinted across the platform. Blasts hit the ground around them. Jalen reached his ship first, firing back to cover Lyra. She jumped inside, and Jalen sealed the hatch. The engines roared to life again. Jalen lifted off as more enforcer ships appeared above them. Lyra slid into the co-pilot's seat. "Do you have another plan?" Jalen pushed the ship higher, breaking through the thin clouds. "Yeah, one more." They couldn't trust the black market. They couldn't buy help. If they wanted to warn the galaxy, they would have to fight their way to the free system's broadcast station themselves. No more deals. No more shortcuts. Jalen and Lyra spent the next 2 days flying under stealth mode. They couldn't risk another ambush. The betrayal on Heron's Reach had cost them valuable time. The enforcers were closing in fast. Their destination now was Orion Gate, the final warp gate that connected their sector to the free systems. Once they crossed it, they could reach Vora Prime, the largest independent broadcast station in the galaxy. It was their last and only chance. The journey was tense. Jalen barely spoke. He kept checking the ship's sensors, looking for any sign of pursuit. Lyra stayed quiet too, but Jalen knew she was thinking the same thing. So far, they had survived by luck. But luck wouldn't hold forever. When they finally reached Orion Gate, Jalen's heart sank. The gate wasn't empty. A council battle fleet blocked the path. Dozens of ships hovered around the glowing ring. Fighters, cruisers, and one massive dreadnought with the council's crest painted across its hull. Jalen slowed the ship and stared at the impossible wall of firepower. "They knew we'd come this way," Lyra whispered. Jalen felt his throat tighten. "They're guarding the gate, waiting for us." Lyra leaned closer to the window. "Look at that," she said. Jalen followed her gaze. Small freighters, cargo ships, and civilian vessels were trapped on the edge of the gate. They weren't allowed to pass. The fleet was blocking everyone. Jalen gritted his teeth. They're locking down the free systems. The council wasn't just trying to stop them. They were cutting off all travel in and out. No messages. No weaknesses. Jalen sat back, thinking fast. "We can't fight that fleet." Lyra didn't answer right away. "Maybe not," she said. "But there's another way." Jalen turned to her. "What do you mean?" Lyra pointed to the side of the gate. "See that old maintenance tunnel? It runs through the ring. If we can get inside, we might slip through before they notice." Jalen frowned. "That tunnel's not made for ships." "It's tight, but it's possible," Lyra said. "I've done it once before, years ago." Jalen looked back at the fleet. The longer they waited, the greater the risk. "All right," he said. "We try your way." Jalen dropped the ship lower and cut power to the main engines. They drifted silently toward the dark side of the gate. The tunnel entrance was barely visible, a narrow crack in the giant ring structure. Jalen tightened his grip on the controls. "Hold on," he warned. The ship tilted and slipped into the tunnel. The walls were dangerously close. Warning lights flashed on the console. One wrong move could tear the ship apart. Jalen kept his hands steady. The tunnel curved sharply. Metal scraped against the ship's wings. "We're almost through," Lyra whispered. But then, alarms blared. The fleet had noticed them. A squad of fighters turned and raced toward the tunnel exit. Jalen pushed the ship forward, scraping the walls again. "Come on," he shouted. The ship shot out of the tunnel, spinning into open space on the other side. The fighters opened fire. Jalen pulled hard to the right, dodging blasts. "Lyra, weapons!" Lyra jumped to the gunner's seat and fired back. The fighters swarmed them. One blast hit their rear shields, shaking the ship. "We won't last long," Lyra shouted. Jalen's mind raced. He spotted a large fuel transport drifting nearby. "If we get close to that tanker, they can't fire without risking an explosion." Jalen steered the ship toward the tanker. The fighters hesitated. They circled, waiting for a clear shot. Jalen opened the comm to Lyra. "This is it. You ready?" Lyra strapped in. "Do it." Jalen hit the afterburners. The ship shot past the tanker and straight toward the free systems border. The fighters chased them, but they stayed back, afraid to fire too close to the fuel ship. Just ahead, the stars shifted. They were approaching Vora Prime's sector beacon. A new signal flashed on the console. "Free Systems Authority, identify yourself." Jalen hit the comm. "This is Jalen Cross. We have critical data for the Free Systems Council. Request immediate landing." Static filled the channel for a moment. Then, coordinates locked. "Prepare for docking." Jalen let out a long breath. They had made it through the gate. But the fight wasn't over yet. Behind them, the Council's fleet was already turning. They were coming to stop the broadcast. Vora Prime stood alone in the dark stretch of space, a massive station built on the remains of an old moon. It glowed softly with blue lights. Thousands of ships hovered nearby. Cargo ships, miners, traders, and rebel vessels. This was the heart of the free systems. Here, the Council had no control. Jalen guided the warden toward the docking bay. The Free Systems Authority had already cleared their landing. But Jalen's hands were still shaking. He knew the Council's fleet was behind them. It wouldn't be long before they arrived. The ship settled with a hard thud on the landing pad. Jalen shut down the engines and grabbed the data core. Lyra stood beside him, helmet under her arm, checking her blaster. "You ready for this?" she asked. Jalen nodded. "This is the only way." They hurried through the docking tunnel, passing guards and workers. The station's control tower was at the top. That was where the broadcast systems were located, high-power transmitters that could send data across every channel in the galaxy. They reached a checkpoint. Two Free Systems soldiers stood in their way. "State your business," one of them said. Jalen showed the data core. "I need to see Commander Rel." "Now." The guard looked at Lyra, recognizing her at once. "Luda Hale." She nodded. "It's urgent. Let us through." The guards exchanged looks, then stepped aside. Jalen and Lyra ran into the lift and shot upward toward the command center. Jalen could feel his heart pounding harder with every second. They had made it this far. There could be no mistakes now. The lift opened to a wide command room filled with officers and tech crews. In the center stood Commander Rel, a tall woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes. She turned to them as they entered. "Lyra," Rel said, surprised. "What's going on?" Jalen stepped forward. "We have something the galaxy needs to see." He placed the data core on the main console. Rel raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Jalen looked her in the eye. "Proof that the High Council has voted to erase humanity. Earth has less than 30 days left." The room went silent. Rel narrowed her eyes. "Show me." Jalen loaded the files onto the station system. The screen filled with council documents, fleet orders, votes, and execution plans. Officers leaned in, reading in shock. Rel took a step back, looking furious. "They lied to us all." Jalen nodded. "That's why we're here. You have the transmitters. Send this out. The galaxy needs to know." Rel turned to her officers. "Prepare the broadcast." The tech crews worked fast, linking the data to the station's transmitters. Lights flickered as the system came online. But before the signal could launch, alarms blared. A soldier shouted, "Commander, the Council fleet has arrived. They're powering weapons." Jalen's stomach dropped. They were out of time. Rel looked at Jalen. "They'll blow us apart before we can finish the broadcast." Jalen gripped the console. "Start the transmission. I'll buy you time." Lyra grabbed his arm. "You're not going alone." Jalen knew better than to argue. "Let's go." They ran back to the docking bay. Jalen jumped into the warden, while Lyra took the Nomad. They lifted off together, heading straight for the fleet. The Council's dreadnought loomed ahead. Jalen opened the comm channel. "This is Jalen Cross. I know you can hear me, Vrax." The reply came in seconds. High Executive Vrax's cold voice filled the cabin. "You should have run, Jalen." Jalen clenched his jaw. "It's over. The truth is out." Vrax laughed quietly. "Not yet." The dreadnought's weapons charged. Jalen spoke again. "Call off your attack. If you don't, I'll ram this ship into your bridge." Vrax stayed silent for a moment. "You're willing to die for this?" Jalen glanced at Lyra's ship flying beside him. "We're both willing." Vrax gave a bitter smile. "Goodbye, Jalen." The dreadnought fired. Jalen pushed the warden forward, heading straight for the giant ship. Blasts rocked his hull, tearing the shields apart. Lyra flew alongside him, returning fire. The dreadnought's guns focused on them. Inside Vora Prime, the broadcast timer hit 0. The transmission began. Across the galaxy, every screen, every channel, every system lit up with the Council's secret vote. Names, orders, and proof of the planned destruction of Earth. The truth was finally out. Vrax saw it too. His face twisted in rage. He ordered the fleet to retreat. The damage was done. They couldn't stop the spread now. Jalen turned his ship around, limping back toward the station. Lyra's ship followed, smoke trailing from her engines. Vora Prime's docking bay opened again. They had survived. Jalen shut down the ship and leaned back exhausted. Lyra walked in, her face pale but alive. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. The galaxy had heard the truth. The galaxy burned with anger. Every colony, every system, every ship that had seen the broadcast knew the truth now. News spread like wildfire. The High Council had lied. They had voted in secret to erase an entire species. People who had trusted the Council for centuries were now turning against it. Jalen and Lyra watched from the command center on Vora Prime. Massive screens showed protests breaking out on distant worlds. Ships blocked Council supply lines. Rebel groups formed alliances faster than the Council could respond. Commander Rel stood at the window, arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold. "You started something big," she said quietly. Jalen leaned on the console, still catching his breath. "They started it," he replied. "We just showed the galaxy what they really are." Rel nodded slowly. "Earth is safe for now. The Council pulled their fleets back, but they'll strike again. You know they will." Jalen already knew. The Council wouldn't give up. They would rebuild, regroup, and come back stronger. The war for control of the galaxy had just begun. Lyra walked over and placed a hand on Jalen's shoulder. "What happens now?" she asked. Jalen looked at the data core on the table, now empty. The files had already gone public. Their mission was complete, but their fight wasn't over. "We disappear," Jalen said. "For now." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Disappear?" Jalen nodded. "The Council will be hunting us. We can't help anyone if we're dead. We need to stay hidden until the time is right to fight again." Rel turned to face them. "You're both welcome to stay here. Vora Prime will protect you." Jalen gave a tired smile. "Thank you, but this isn't over. The galaxy needs more than just words. It needs action." Lyra nodded in agreement. "We'll be ready when the time comes." Rel saluted them. "Good luck, Jalen." "Good luck, Lyra. You started something that will change everything." Jalen and Lyra left the command center together. They walked down the long docking tunnel back to their ships. The station buzzed with life. Fighters were being loaded. Crews prepared for the next wave of conflict. Jalen paused at the hatch of the Warden. He looked back at Lyra. "Still with me?" Lyra smirked. "Always." They climbed into their ships and prepared for launch. The galaxy was waking up. People were fighting back. The Council had lost its control, but the battle for freedom had only just begun. Jalen powered up his engines and sent one last message to Lyra. "We lit the spark. Now we watch it burn." The two ships lifted off and vanished into the stars, leaving Vora Prime behind. Somewhere out there, the next fight was waiting.